So thanks for joining us today for this webinar, 10 Fundamental Points to Consider for Your Website, with presenter Matt Brockett of Brockett Creative Group. Matt has over 23 years of experience as a creative director, art designer, and web developer, and we're thrilled that he's able to join us here today for this webinar. Your host for today's webinar is the Mohawk Valley Small Business Development Center. The Mohawk Valley SBDC is part of the New York Small Business Development Centers network of 22 campus-based centers and outreach offices across New York State. Our centers provide free business advising and research, as well as free or low-cost training to startups, entrepreneurs, and small business owners. Co-sponsoring today's webinar is the New Hartford Chamber of Commerce, and I'd especially like to thank them for all of their efforts in helping to promote the webinar. I'm your moderator, Zach Steffen, and I'm an associate business advisor at the Mohawk Valley SBDC. And with that, I'll turn things over to Matt.
Thanks, Zach. So I'm excited to kind of go over some tips that I've put together just from my experience over the years as a web developer. I've been doing this for so many years that I've seen so many changes happen over the years. I've really understood where clients have had pain points. I've heard a lot of confusion over the years, of just where to go with developing a new website, or even knowing if what you developed is the right approach. So yes, we're going to go over the 10 fundamental points to consider for your website, or better yet, I think 10 steps to a successful website also really tell the story on what I hope we can do today. And I've been developing websites since 1997. As you can imagine, a lot has changed, like I was saying. I have been involved in the development process at just about every level. I've worked on hundreds of websites with hundreds of clients, and I put together these 10 points based on just that experience that I've had over the years. So my goal is to hopefully help you understand the steps in developing a website, and hopefully answer these questions and maybe even more. So you want a website, but where do you start? The big question is, should I do it with a designer that I hire, or do I do it myself? I know it's difficult sometimes to want to hire out when you feel you might be able to do it, but hopefully, understanding these 10 points, you'll be able to make that decision. Maybe you have one and you also just don't know if what you've done is right. So some of the 10 points that we're going to touch on are: first, goals. Then we're going to go over the target, then domain name, the website builder, web hosting, website content, on-page SEO, ADA compliance, reputation management, which is also off-site SEO, and support and maintenance. Okay, before we get into these 10 points, there is one thing that I just want to mention to always keep in the back of your mind: how your website is going to work for you. Think of it as not only a location, your website, but also as an employee. You want to have this website working for you. You want it to generate leads. You don't just want to have a website just to have it and hope that it's doing something for you. So starting off with our goals. What do you want your website to do for your business? Taking this first step is really key to having a successful website, and it will definitely guide you in the right direction and taking the right steps to make sure that you have a successful website. Now, some of the questions you want to ask yourself are, is this site to generate leads? Is my site to be a resource for people and be informational? Do I want to sell products or my services? Do you want to accept payments, such as bill payments or even donations if you're an organization? Booking appointments for an event even. What other goals do you feel would help you to just achieve success with your website and have it again work for you? I mean, I can't say that enough, that having a website and having it work for you is just key. So now that you've established your goals, hopefully at this point, we can now move into your target. Who do you want to reach? Who do you want to target? And in identifying them, such as gender, age, what region do you want it to be, local or national? Are you reaching out to consumers or businesses? You also, if you're trying to reach out to businesses, you want to perhaps even focus on their job title. Are you trying to reach a president? Are you trying to reach a clerk? It really helps to better understand who you're trying to reach with your goals so that we can make the best decisions through the process of developing a website. Also, what's your industry, or what industries are you targeting? Also, language. We have a few clients where language is pretty important. We have one that's trying to target 15 different languages. So whether you have one language, 2 languages, or 15, you just got to keep that in mind in figuring out the right path in developing your website. Also, identifying your target will just help you to better connect with them and communicate with them, right down to the copywriting. You need to use keywords. You need to use phrases that they'll connect with or better understand. Something I like to do, I like to take it even a step further, and I like to create personas. Personas, this is a profile of your target customer to better understand their buying behavior. So you want to maybe create a list of questions that you can pass out to existing customers or clients that you feel comfortable with passing on a questionnaire to, and ask them questions like, what are your pain points? What do you help them solve in their life or in their everyday life? Where do they go for information? All of these types of questions, understanding these different details just help you better understand how you're going to reach to these people, how to communicate to them so that your website can again be successful and it will work for you rather than just be a website that's out there. Back to this one. Also, I put in the corner here a link to a worksheet that I already have created. You can take that if you'd like. You can use it if you want to create your own questions. That's up to you. But I just wanted to, include that just in case you wanted to use that as a base outline to help you out. Now we're going to move on to the domain name. Now that we kind of understand your goals and who you want to target, that does play a role in your domain name. So you want to align that domain with your business name and its goals, like I was just saying. Consider these when choosing a domain. You want to consider obviously your business name or your brand. Even the type of business should be considered when you are creating a domain name. Type of products or services. Make your domain memorable, and you want to keep it simple, short, and concise. Having it too long, having it include dashes and other characters, it just makes it a little more difficult for people to remember and to find you. And don't be afraid to step outside of the box and make it playful or fun. 3 examples I have here, such as Enjoy Primo Pizza. They chose to go more on the playful side, which really works well for them. One that was where we kept it more simple, short, and concise is Virtual Barn Fest that we did for Remsen Barn Festival. So they chose not to really work in the brand so much as getting more to the point of what the purpose of that website was for. And then, of course, for us, we chose to go straight to the business name. Now, with so many URLs and domain names taken after all these years, it's really hard to get something that will work for you unless you start thinking creatively. And that's where considering all these points will help you get to a point to where you have a domain name that should make sense and work for you. Now, I like to try to help my clients understand the different parts to a website, like domain name. There's so much confusion that happens between domain name and hosting. And sometimes they're like, well, I thought I just paid for something, but now they have another bill, such as like for the domain name. So I know that it can get a little confusing on what a domain name is, what a hosting is, and some of these things. So one way to think about a domain name is it's like your home address. It's where the people will visit you. You can buy your domain name. You may already know some of this, but you can buy your domain name with GoDaddy or with Network Solutions or Znum. There's just so many of them that will work just fine. It doesn't really matter too much in where you buy them. Prices obviously varies quite a bit between them. You can buy a domain name for 1 to 10 years. I like going with the 10-year option, just so I kind of forget about it for the next 10 years, not have to worry about, renewing it every single year. Or, we've had clients where they renewed their domain name or hadn't renewed their domain name and their website was down and they didn't realize it. So just the longer you can do it, the better. Also, just consider if you choose to go with a web developer, they can set that up for you. They should be able to set up an account for you so that you have complete ownership. That's the way I recommend that you do it. Also, you just want to make sure that when you have this domain name, that you always have those credentials, login credentials, handy. So when you're launching a website, or if you are choosing your email service, those settings have to change on your domain name. And you don't want to get caught hunting for those credentials. I've seen that over and over again over the years where we hadn't been able to track down the credentials for almost a month, and the client unfortunately was waiting until they could track that down. So just making sure that you have your own account if somebody was to set it up for you, and just making sure you have those credentials somewhere handy and securely. But again, just think of that domain name as your home address. The next point we'll move to is your builder. Now, there are so many different builders out there. There's WordPress, and I'm sure you've heard some of these or even seen commercials for like Wix and Shopify, Squarespace. There's GoDaddy, Weebly, HostGator, and there's just so many more. Joomla. Some of these are more technical that a developer would use, which really are a lot more flexible. But choosing the right one, it depends on if you're going to do it yourself, if you're going to hire somebody, and if you're selling something. So Shopify, that's great if you're selling a product. But it also, again, has its limitations, where if you had a developer use WordPress, there's a lot more flexibility there. You can really have some crazy functionality built in that might be unique to your business that something like Shopify couldn't accommodate. Excuse me. Then there's your pretty typical and standard builders like Wix, Square, and Weebly. They do a decent job, but they definitely have their issues. But some of these key points to consider when trying to figure out what builder you should use. Even if you hire a web developer, some of them use these builders like Wix and Weebly as well. But do you want to build your website or hire somebody? That's one of the big points to really think about, and will definitely determine what builder you end up using. Are you selling your products? Like I mentioned earlier, do you have a unique goal or need? That'll also really depend on what builder. So many of them are not that flexible. You pretty much have to use what they have to offer. They have templates, and trying to go outside of those templates or those functions can become quite the challenge. You want to make sure whatever you choose has mobile-friendly design options. That's becoming less of an issue. For a while there were so many that just really struggled in providing that. Make sure that the builder you choose is SEO friendly, which is search engine optimization and how you're found on the various browsers. ADA accessibility. Now, this is probably the biggest issue with a lot of the builders at this point. It's a newer piece to web development, but it really needs to be considered, and we'll get into that a little more later on. And site speed. Some of these builders really struggle with having a well-performing website and how quickly they serve the information on the page. You may come across a few sites where they're kind of slow and delayed. It's a possibility that it's the builder that they chose. Now, again, I like to always bring it down to sort of like a property level. It's just my my way to bring some of these elements together. So, first you have the domain name, which is the address. Well, the builder, you want to think of it more like your house, the structure. And that structure, it also is the functionality. What are the various rooms, or even your office or business? There obviously are different functions for each room. And that's kind of what you think about for your builder. Just again, be sure that you choose a builder that can accommodate your goals, especially long term. It's hard to think long term, but that's why you want to establish goals. Make sure at whatever platform you choose, that it will meet your needs. Make sure that to know where those login credentials are for that as well, whether it's a WordPress site or Weebly site. You just want to make sure you, again, know where those credentials are so you can quickly access them and make the edits. It seems pretty obvious, but I can't tell you how many times we just have not been able to track down for our clients their credentials. Next is the hosting. So now that we've established those goals and we've established our target and we've picked out our domain name, we've figured out our builder. Now that builder is going to determine what hosting company you use. Some of them, or actually many of them, have their own hosting company. There's just a few that don't. And if you are to choose a host for, let's say you have a WordPress site that's being developed for you, again, the developer will probably make recommendations for you, so you don't have to think about it too much. But it's also, if you choose to do it yourself and you go with something like Wix or Weebly, you really want to pay attention to their performance and their track record on how often those sites are up. You might have to do a little research on that, but reliability is definitely a key point. Again, back to speed. Just want to make sure what you choose is, produces a fast site. Flexibility. There are just various hosting options like storage space. Also, believe it or not, how many people can visit your website. That's a factor in some of these hosting plans. Storage we've talked about. Price. It can vary so much. Some of these hosting companies are just way overpriced. Some of them you really get a lot for what you're paying for, and a web developer should be able to, an experienced one should be able to guide you through that and help you out, or they should be the ones doing that for you. So hosting, you just want to think of that. So the hosting is really, if you want to think of that as like the land, so you have your house on the land and you have your address with the domain name. And I hope that breaking it down like this just helps you kind of understand how all these pieces come together and work together. But yeah, the hosting is where you really want to think about it as like where everything lives. It's where your files are. It's where your images are, your video. That's all stored on the host. They're generally an annual agreement, but there's also a monthly. Again, your web developer should be doing this for you if you choose to go with a developer. Make sure that you know, again, where your login credentials are. I keep pushing that one just because I encounter that so often. Now, with your hosting, you want to make sure you always have an Ssl certificate. You've probably come across a few sites to where you get alerted that it's not secure. And Google now requires SSLs. If you don't have one, it's really going to hurt your position in Google search. So you just want to make sure whatever host you choose that it has an SSL installed. And those SSLs, if you don't know what that does for you, it's when there's any sort of information being captured or transferred within your website. All right, now we're moving into content. This is really the heart of the main, or the heart of your website, and where everything communicates with the visitor. And you just want to make sure that you're telling your story, that you're offering value of some kind, and you want to generate leads. Again, back to, you want your website to work for you. You want it to be not only that location, but also think of it like an employee. You want to speak to the audience that you've established through your, not only through your goals, but also through your target. And if you did personas, you just want to use that information and try to create content that's going to communicate with them and entice them. And it's also, when you have a marketing plan, your website is really the cornerstone of your marketing. So you need to make sure that this website is playing a role in your marketing strategy. Now, there are going to be a few things that we go over here in order to help you kind of establish your content. There's a sitemap. You may have been familiar with some of these terms, but sitemap, establishing the funnels on your site, creating a wireframe, and of course your text and images, creating shareable content, and generating something that are called like lead magnets. So the first one we talked about is the sitemap. The sitemap is an outline or schematic of all the pages on your site and what those pages are going to do and how they're going to function. They really need to align with your goals, of course, but what you want to outline here is like my contact page. Is it going to have a contact form? Do I have an events calendar? Will it be enough to where I need a system, like an event calendar system? Am I writing blogs? Do I have one of these pages as a blog? Is it an About Us page? So you want to take the time to develop the sitemap and establish all of your pages, the content, and the type of functions that those pages have. Next is creating funnels. Funnels are like the path, the journey within the page that you want to create in order to get people to actually want to contact you and submit a contact form or some other form that you might have on the site. How are you going to, when somebody visits, how are you going to get them to the point where they will want to fill out the contact form? And that's generally done with a call to action, like learn more today, and some of those key phrases that are typically used for a call to action. A wireframe. The wireframe is like the blueprint of your page structure. So as you can see here in my example, you just kind of draw blocks and outline how you want that content to fall on the page. A lot of the builders, they already have layouts established for you, which is great, but it doesn't mean it's always going to align with what your specific needs are. So you just want to map this out the best you can before you even get into picking a template with a builder, or a web developer should be doing this part of it for you. But if you choose to do it yourself, it's really a key piece in the development. Just what's on the page before you have to start scrolling. On that home page, do I want to have a panel that touches on every section of your website? So you have a little panel about us, and that leads them to the page that has more information. And you have a panel that lists out all of your events, or not all of your events, but featured events that lead you over to a calendar. Or perhaps you're selling products and you want to feature a few products. Well, you would feature a few here, and it would just push you off to the rest of the store. So just outlining a wireframe is definitely an important step. I would do this for every page that has a different function to it. So again, if you have a page that is a blog page, how do you want that page to be laid out? Or do you have an events page? Or do you have any unique functions that you need your website to have? And that you would just outline here. Next is just text and images. There are things that you really want to consider when having the content written or writing it yourself. Of course, you want to keep it short and concise. You don't want it too wordy. It's hard not to always want to just say everything, but you also want to give them a reason to contact you. And nobody really, I don't want to say nobody, but most people don't want to read. So just keeping it short and to the point is a huge factor. And it also should be within a 5th grade reading level, 5th grade or less. You also want to think SEO, which again, search engine optimization. You want to think about what people are searching so that relates to your business. And you want to work those keywords into your content within reason. I mean, obviously you don't want to keyword stuff or anything like that because that can actually hurt you. But really, when you research those keywords, you're just doing it so that you're speaking more the language of what people are actually searching for and connect better with. You also need to make sure you optimize your images. It's so easy to just take a picture with your phone or your camera and just go ahead and upload it. The problem with that is many of these builders, they don't optimize the image for you, and you could have a 5 meg image trying to load on your page. It's going to slow your page down. It's going to make some people wait, especially on mobile, as the image is loading, when it's really unnecessary. Generally, images are pretty small on a page, so you don't want to upload anything larger than what's actually going to be on the page. There's some free online tools where you can do this if you don't have any sort of image editor on your computer. There's a site, I believe, called tinyjpeg.com. You can upload those images right on the web page, and it will optimize it for you, and you just download that, and that's the file you can upload onto your website. You want to try to keep those images that you do have, try to keep them as professional looking as possible. You don't want, first impressions, you don't want people to think you're just kind of winging it and throwing things up there that, that are perceived where you didn't take your time or care for those images. It's very tempting to use stock images. There are some images where it's not a problem, but most people pick up on a site that just have a ton of stock images. It becomes impersonal. So you just want to keep that in the back of your mind, that try to use images that you are able to create yourself or have a local photographer do for you. Definitely videos. Videos are huge, even still. You just want to try to work those into your site the best you can. It's better to not use a video if it's a low quality, but then again, sometimes just having a video in general is helpful. You also want to make sure you always include a privacy policy on your page. I think that's even a Google requirement that will hurt your position. And now accessibility statement. Accessibility is just becoming a huge factor Google's now starting to consider that as well in determining your position. And again, we're going to get more into that in just a minute. Shareable content. You want to make sure you're always generating valuable content that people are going to want to share. That's how you're going to get the word out fairly easily and fairly inexpensively. You can create blog posts and events, even events. It just creates a way for you to share that information on social media, news stories, and press releases. I mean, these are great ways to easily create content that you can share. Blog posts, going back to that one, you know, a really good way to create posts is to think sort of like in a Q&A kind of approach. You know, what are those common questions that people ask about your business? You know, all you need is a paragraph or two on answering some questions that are commonly asked. And then what it does too is it makes you an authority in that industry, that you're able to answer their questions and take that approach. Now the last one is lead magnets. Not too many people have heard about this one, but what a lead magnet is it's content that you create that somebody would want and would have to give up their email or other personal information in order to download it. I'm sure you've come across this in various places, but it's a great tool to generate leads. It's a great tool to, you know, just gather, those potential leads. But you can do everything from a white paper. You can do presentations such as this one that I have here. I could put on my website and just ask you to have to enter your email address just to download it. Or you could have spec sheets, or maybe you have even like a PDF of just more information about your products or a service or anything like that. But you want to think about content that are, again, it's just going to generate leads for you, going back to getting the site to work for you. You just want to create that content that's going to generate a lead. Okay, this one's pretty straightforward, but again, I did it with the others, and now you want to think about your content like the rooms of your home. Each room has a function, and just like you have it furnished and you have contents in it, you just want to think about your content in that same way on your site. Again, don't try to say too much. Your website developer can have an experienced copywriter handle this, or maybe you even know one yourself. Keep your content active and up to date. Having a site that never really changes, it's just going to lose its position in search engine, and people are going to lose interest as well in even visiting your site. Now next is on-page SEO. What are people searching for that relates to your products and services? So you really want to understand the keywords that are being used on your site and that people are searching for. I kind of touched on this earlier. So you want to search keywords that what people are searching, and not so much how you think of it, because those keywords are what are going to attract people when they're doing a search in Google. So, and it's also how people are thinking about perhaps your product or service. Some of these are technical, But a lot of these builders also make it pretty clear on creating like a page title. That's that text that shows up in those tabs in your browser. And also when you do a Google search, it's the top line that shows up. I think I have an example later on in here. Page description, that's also another meta tag where it's just basically telling Google, you know, what this page is all about. And it also shows up in a Google search. Image alt text, every time you upload an image, you want to make sure you describe what that image is about. Again, trying to work keywords in there if you can, that would be great. And of course, the text on the page will help Google and other search engines better understand what the content is all about. It's probably more for another webinar, but having that text, that content on your page, and informing Google what that page is all about is more how Google is determining your position. Google now wants to position the most relevant content in a search. And so it's more about the page's content than just the keywords. You also want to make sure that your site is changing and the content is fresh. Again, another just factor that Google looks for is how often is your site changing and the content on it. All right, so just think of your SEO as just an invitation to your home. Some of the factors, and you want to work this into your content on your site. And also, I'll just help Google better understand is the who, what, where, when, and why. Those play a factor in search engine optimization, and it helps you more easily kind of figure out how you would take that to your web page. Again, you can do your research with Google has a keyword planner that you could use. You would just need a Google account. Again, a web developer who understands SEO should be able to help establish the keywords for you or with you. And of course, being an authority in the industry. That's where the blogs and other information come into play. I put on here the Google Keyword Planner link. Again, I believe you need to have a Google account that you can easily set up. And they might even want you to set up an ad, not necessarily one that you would be running or actually paying for, but I think they want you to at least get to that point. Now, ADA compliance, this one is really, really becoming important for your website. It is very difficult to really know if you're not experienced with it, know how you can even make your website ADA compliant, but really the key is you want to make it possible for people with visual or physical disabilities to be able to read your site and navigate your website. So there are readers that actually will read the site to someone who is visually impaired. And this is becoming a requirement for any organization or business that services the public. It also is required for federal, state agencies, educational institutions. They are all required to be ADA compliant to make sure that that website will actually be able to be read rather, to someone who's visually impaired, as well as someone that has physical disabilities where they can't use your mouse, or they can't use their mouse or their keyboard. They have a device that helps them simply navigate. You can think of it as like the arrows on your keyboard. That's how they would really navigate all the way through their site. or through your site. So the way the site's structured really makes a difference, and that's ADA compliance. You also have to make sure that you pay attention to SEO, because SEO will play a role here too, such as doing the alt tags on your images. So when you upload an image, you have to describe that image. That actually plays a huge role in ADA compliance. Now, I like to say every business really should be doing this at this point, because it's just it's going to happen to where every business will be required to do this. I know California has already done that. So if your website's served to anyone in California, you become liable just for serving your site to them. So it's a good idea just to make sure your site's ADA compliant. Many of the builders are getting better with this. Just recently, I had a new client come to me that had a Wix site, and it is not ADA compliant friendly at all. Even though they are touting that it is, it's still, there are scanners that we use. It really does fall short tremendously, and just using Wix could make you liable. But I know that they are working at improving that. I don't know about many of the others. I work with WordPress, and we're easily able to make a website fully ADA compliant. I believe Shopify is pretty good with that as well. But you definitely want to keep this in mind, and you definitely want to investigate whatever direction you go or whoever you choose. They're aware of ADA compliance and that they know what they're doing, and that I would even ask for examples of a site that might have this so that you could check it out. All right, so now that we've got our website built and we have the content on the page, that's where you can move into off-site SEO, which also kind of plays into your reputation. This really should be a part of doing a website. You want to make sure you have your Google listing connected to your website. Also, Google will get information for their listing if you don't claim it, which you can do. But if you don't, Google will actually pull from your website in order to generate that Google listing that they have. Also, comments, you just want to monitor those. And there's also like Yelp and TripAdvisor. There are so many directory sites out there that you just want to claim after you have a website that will just help you control that information. It will help you to just monitor, what's being said about your company. But this, you definitely want to just make sure you do this after you've launched your website. So you want to proactively monitor your business. You get other websites to link over to your site to boost credibility. That again can be your blog posts that they might be linking to, or an event or a press release. You also want to be active on social media. The more you post there, the more you can get people to come back to your website, which again should be the cornerstone of your marketing. Then you want to claim your business listing, not only with Google, but there's also one with Bing and Yelp. I'm sorry, not Yelp, but Bing and Yahoo. You also just want to make sure you're monitoring your reviews, what's being said. And then that on-site SEO is definitely going to play a role on the off-site and how search engines find your site and categorize it. So this is just one example of a listing that is within Google of your business and the information that's there. But this really should all be done when it can be done before you even have a website, but you just want to make sure you absolutely do this after you have your website done. And again, it's Google, Yahoo, Yelp, TripAdvisor. There are just so many, over 60 main directory sites. Also, it doesn't. There are just so many different sites too where people are posting their opinions about companies and organizations. So there are tools that will aggregate all of these reviews into one central point to where you can respond to all of them from one point. So, that's if somebody has any interest in that, I can kind of guide you or direct you there. But it's definitely worth just making sure you are on top of what people are saying and responding to them. Now, with every website, you need to make sure that you have some level of support and maintenance. You don't want to have a designer or a developer just create your site, hand it off to you, and say good luck. I've heard so many horror stories like that. And but making sure that you establish some sort of relationship where you get support and maintenance on your website. Again, it's just so important. Keep the system and builder up to date. A lot of the builders automatically are updated, but some of them require having you do it. It can actually break the website design if it's done and not done right. So you just need somebody who keeps that in mind, like WordPress for one. And when you make a plugin update or even a theme update to the design, it can break that site. So there should be a lot of testing done and prior to actually pushing on the live site. Regular updates to the site content and SEO. It's a good idea, if you can't do it yourself, to hire somebody to do that for you. Making sure your site is secure. There's not only the SSL, but there's other security tools that should be installed and monitored, as well as your hosting itself should be secure hosting. They should have some sort of tools available to you for you to make sure that your site's secure. You don't want it to be hacked. You don't want DDoS attacks, which is where your site gets hammered by so many hits that it just shuts it right down. And actually the hosting company will shut you down if your site's being attacked like that. So you just want to put tools in place to make sure your site is secure. Again, don't let it fall out of ADA compliance. Every time you add content to your site, you're potentially affecting compliance and how that content is being read to somebody, or how they navigate through that content. So you just have to be mindful of being ADA compliant. Again, just keeping your site current and fresh. Having somebody give you suggestions or ideas, maybe even updating the template. Some of these builders allow you to switch out a template pretty easily. And you can do that as time goes on over a few years, just to give it a nice fresh update. All right, so just a conclusion to everything we talked about. I know I threw a ton of information at you. It's pretty overwhelming, and these are just a lot of things that I've dealt with over the years. But I just hope that these 10 points really help you to make the best decisions, the best choices when developing a website. Taking these steps, though they can be time consuming and though, you know, it's a process, it's definitely going to make you more successful. It's definitely going to make your website work for you rather than just be. You know, I can't stress it enough on how important it is to take all these steps and you don't want to waste your time. You don't want to waste your energy. You don't want to waste your capital just to have a website and not have it do anything for you. So I can't stress enough just how, you know, to take the time to go through each of these steps and do it right. Yeah, so those 10 steps, I really believe, and has really been successful for many of our clients. So again, thank you. Thank you for giving me your, you know, the past hour. I hope that this has proven to be helpful in some way for you. Hopefully it's maybe taken some anxiety out in the process. Hopefully it didn't add more anxiety, but just take your time, just look at everything. And I am more than happy to, you know, answer any questions that you guys have at this point. And even following this, feel free to reach out to me. I'm more than happy to, you know, answer any questions or just give you some ideas or thoughts on your journey on a new website or your existing site. So Zach, I don't know if you want to take it from here.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Matt. That was very informative. So we're going to open it up to questions now. We have a few questions here already. If anybody else has any questions at all, please feel free to type them in to your questions panel. The first question for you, Matt, is in regard to target personas and the demographics that you're targeting with your website. You talked a bit about how important it is to do that. Can you give some examples of how you might put that into practice in terms of whether it's the website design or the copy that you're featuring on the website or even the function that the website serves, how you would tailor a website to reach those specific personas?
Sure. So an example of, you know, a persona is, so a client might, you know, we hand these out to clients and, you know, based on general feedback that we might get on a question like, how do you look for information that relates to my industry? Do you use the internet? Do you use social media? So by better understanding how your typical client takes the approach of finding a company like yours or a website will give you a better sense of how you need to put your, or where you need to put your energy. So if it's social media, create that content on your website that communicates to a potential customer in the same language that they're, you know, that they speak. So you want to just generate this content that you can then just share onto social media. So if social media is the way that they find their information, you want to post that information on social media and just try to lead them back to your website. Your website is, again, the cornerstone of your marketing. So whatever you can do to bring them back to the site, but you also want to reach them in the area or the place where they would be looking for information first. I don't know if that was helpful in answering that question, but it's really where do I want to push my resources, my energy in order to get them to come back to my site and or give me a call. Sure. Or stop into my business. You know, those personas are just going to help you understand what most of your potential customers are going to do and how they behave.
So would a target persona even inform things like the design of the website, perhaps?
Yeah, it could determine the color of the buttons on your site. let's say for whatever reason, they tend to go towards an orange button over a green button. I mean, it's also A to B, but it's also hearing what existing customers have to say and what led them to even come to you in the first place.
Sure.
Or what pain points do they have that you didn't realize that you could now make sure you answer within your website. By understanding those pain points that they have, now you can speak to them more directly.
Thank you.
Yeah.
We have a couple questions here about search engine optimization. First is, does the domain name that you choose affect your search engine optimization? Is that pulled by search engines?
It's not an absolute, but there is a lot of evidence that the domain name definitely will add more value to a search in a search engine. If you do a search for a keyword, and you'll notice that Google will highlight even the domain name, or what they call a subdomain name, or a permalink. I'm starting to get a little technical perhaps, but permalink is that slash and then the rest of the URL. If you have your pages named a certain way, Google will pick up on that, and that is a keyword that somebody searched, so Google is going to use that as a factor since it's in the URL.
Okay.
But when you do a search, you'll see what Google highlights. That should give you a little bit of a sense of how Google is determining.
So again, on the topic of SEO, you mentioned that people would want to avoid what you call keyword stuffing.
Yes.
And you said that search engines don't like that. So how do you know when you're moving beyond, a good faith effort to include relevant keywords in your copy and moving into the category of keyword stuffing?
Yeah, it should have a natural flow to it. If you find that when you read it to yourself out loud and you feel like you're hearing it over and over again, that is kind of a factor, or that will help you kind of determine that keyword is probably in there a little too often. If you start one sentence and the next one starts with the same keyword or even ends with the same keyword, and they're back to back, and you do that more than once, that's definitely starting to stuff the content with that keyword. So reading it out loud is probably a good way to pick up on whether you repeat it too often or not. It doesn't mean you can't have 3 paragraphs or 4 paragraphs on the page, and you can, you have that keyword in there 4 or 5 times. I mean, that still has the potential to be natural. It's when you have 1 paragraph and you have it like 4 or 5 times, now you're starting to stuff it, and it just doesn't sound natural either when you read it.
Sure. Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, so we have a question here regarding security. It says, how do you make your site secure, and can you please explain a bit more about the Ssl certificate?
Yeah, so most host companies, they include the SSL, and many of them will even auto add it, but there are also many to where you have to manually do it. But the SSL is a certificate that is installed at the hosting level. You can pay for SSL certificates, and nowadays they're basically free and included with the hosting, but it's for every site needs to have it. Most builders like Wix and Weebly, they're included. Some of them may charge a little extra to include it, but it's definitely a key factor in SEO, and it's also something that just is, there's no reason to not have it at this point in time. In terms of other security, you could add Cloudflare. If you can go to their website, Cloudflare, that'll block DDoS attacks. That's where your site just gets inundated by bots. And I would probably leave that more to a security company to explain more, but they can just overwhelm your site and your server and end up taking it down. So to avoid that, you can install or use services like Cloudflare, which is free for the base level. And it certainly would do enough for most sites. Other security is if you use something like WordPress, you can use plugins that have security that monitor your site. It'll let you know if somebody's trying to log in to your website, which could potentially be a hack if they were able to figure it out and get in. Also, there are ways for them to go through certain pages in your site. There might be a page or a type of content on your page that would allow a hacker to go in and just find a way to get in there and destroy your website. But just installing different tools, using different services will help, deter that and make your site secure. Yep.
Thank you. So one of the things, Matt, as I listened to your presentation as somebody who's not well-versed in website design, I think the most daunting thing that you discussed is ADA compliance.
Yeah.
And it sounds like a difficult area for someone who doesn't specialize in building websites to truly comply with.
Yeah.
And so it's a question that I have for you is that if you use a website builder, how much assistance can they provide with ADA compliance? Being that every website, is different, can you be confident that if you build a site with a builder that says that they're helping you with ADA compliance, that you are in fact compliant when you're all said and done? Or is it something that a professional really needs to take a look at and help with?
It's probably a good idea to initially have somebody scan the site. There are different scanners out there that anybody could use. There's one called DynoMapper. There's also a service called Accessibility that will scan your website. They also provide tools that you can embed into your site so that maybe your site's not actually ADA compliant, but this tool that you install will translate the site for them and make it ADA compliant. So it's probably not always the best tool to rely on, especially if there's a JavaScript issue. I don't want to get too technical, but if that tool doesn't happen to load properly, then your site is still not compliant to that visitor. But it's definitely a nice tool to fall back on to some level. But there are a lot of resources. There are a lot of resources though to help guide you through it. It's just going to take a lot of homework. And these builders, they're just not caught up to that yet. Eventually, I believe they will be. And some of them are, doing better than others.
So to clarify, Matt, you said that this is something that applies to any business that is doing business with the public.
Yeah.
So if you have a pizza shop, your website has to be ADA compliant. Is that correct? I mean, is it literally any small business that has a public-facing website?
What that is, it's any business that is serving the public, primarily not-for-profits, to be honest.
I see.
Yeah, because they are providing a service to the community.
So they're providing a public service as opposed to simply having a public-facing website.
Exactly.
Understood.
Now, one thing that I said earlier is if your site's being served to someone in California where they require every business to be ADA compliant, now you do fall within their laws.
How can you control whether your site is pulled up by somebody in California, or do you need to be actively soliciting business there in order to fall under that umbrella?
You could say that it's a gray line. We had a new client come to us because they had a lawsuit on them. It was a bed and breakfast. They weren't even aware that this law existed, but someone from California went to their site and decided to serve them a lawsuit. So, so they had to deal with it, and they actually had to pay, but we also had to fix the site for them. So it's, you know, you would never think that that was out there, and it's a shame that small businesses have to deal with something like that. It's just, in my opinion, it's not right, but it is something that's out there that we have to be mindful of. Putting at a minimum an ADA compliant, or what's called an accessibility statement on your site. That's a way for you to say, okay, we're aware that there are some issues with our site, and we will take, you know, an initiative, or we'll take the time to try to resolve it in a certain time frame, like 12 months or something. So some of the, believe it or not, there are bot scanners looking for sites that are not ADA compliant, and they're usually run by a lawyer who has a client waiting on the side, that they then get to sue over it. But where I was going with that is the accessibility statement will deter that bot. It'll say that you recognize it, that you have a plan, and it'll pass right by your site.
Okay.
So there are a few steps. You know, it really could use at least somebody looking at your site that knows what they're doing at least once, to kind of like orient yourself on where you stand, and then you can take the proper steps from there.
Terrific. Thank you.
Yeah.
I see one more question here, Matt. This is in regards to offsite CEO, or excuse me, offsite SEO, which is, I think, a subject maybe that perhaps falls by the wayside when people are thinking about SEO for their website. You talked a bit about the various, you know, functions that are involved with building a website and hosting a website, and how an agency such as yours would be able to help with that. Is offsite SEO something that an agency such as yours would also be able to help with?
Yes, absolutely. It allows us to more easily help you get set up, at least, to connect with all these directory sites, to put tools in place to where you can actually monitor all your reviews and respond to them more easily. We just have, you know, a good developer should have the experience of being able to bring all of these offsite elements together for you more easily, so that you have more control of what's out there, and so that you can respond to what's out there. It also, there are alerts that you can do. So anytime your company's mentioned on the internet, you get an alert that was mentioned. So yes, a company like ours definitely should have the tools to help you out, and make sure that you are set up properly to deal with it, to deal with offsite SEO.
Terrific.
Yeah.
Well, looks like that's the end of the questions. Matt, was there anything else that you wanted to add?
No, that's all. I just encourage everyone to enjoy this beautiful day the best they can. It's just amazing that we have this weather in November.
Absolutely it is. It does not feel like winter is just around the corner.
Not at all. But
Well,
I do hope it was helpful, and I do hope that it gave people enough to think about, and to take the right approach to just have a successful website that's working for you.
Well, thanks again, Matt, and thanks to everyone for joining us today. If you're not located in the Mohawk Valley and you'd like to make an appointment with an SBDC business advisor in your area, you can do so by going to our statewide website. It is nyssbdc.org. Click on Make an Appointment. If you are in the Mohawk Valley and you'd like to make an appointment directly with one of our business advisors, you can do so on our website at incubator.co/intake, as you see on the screen. You can also call our office directly at 315-731-5884. Thanks again for joining us and have a good afternoon.